Red's not supposed to be green, like faith's not supposed to be seen. The sky's not supposed to touch the ground, and a square's not supposed to be round. The moon's not supposed to touch the sun, and a two is not supposed to be a one. And the heart's not supposed to weigh a ton, and forever's not supposed to be done. Winter's not supposed to come in June, and I am not supposed to have the blues. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, babe, except you and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, except you and me. Life's not supposed to be known, and no one is supposed to be alone. Understanding is not supposed to be confused, and the wind is not supposed to lose. Like fire's not supposed to freeze, but like joy is not supposed to grieve. Like you are not supposed to leave what I said I'm not supposed to mean. He is not supposed to have your heart. Baby, we are not supposed to be apart. There are so many things that are not supposed to be said. You and me.
Come on in, y'all. It's a long day, long day. I wish my man was here right now, y'all. I really do. I'm missing him. I need some support from you guys. Kel needs us. I need y'all. Kel needs y'all. But I'm here. I'm in the midst of the moment. I'm feeling things that you guys have yet to feel. Today was a really long, tough day. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Y'all know y'all at the right place to get the right information. I'm not really sad. I'm just furious right now. I'm very furious. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. Y'all know y'all came to the right platform to get the truth. You know what I'm saying? Y'all ain't gonna get this from nowhere else. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. I guess I'm sad because I'm seeing how hard they're trying to take down this man. And I mean, they're using things against him that to me is not even illegal. You know, and they're turning things that's normal to become not normal anymore. They're taking away our normalcy. You know what I mean? And that's very, very frustrating. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. It was a tough day. I put my big girl panties on, y'all, and I need y'all to keep me strong so I can keep being strong for Kels. I ain't gonna lie. Today was a tough day. I wasn't sure how I was gonna come on and do this commentary with you guys, but I'm gonna give it to y'all exactly the way it's here. I mean, I'm down there at the end of this book, so y'all just sit tight because I had to go front and back towards the end because I was running out of pages to write on. You know what I'm saying? It really went front and back because at first I was just doing it through the front. And so, but I have other books. I had grabbed this book, so I haven't even used this one. So tomorrow I'll be filling this one up. This is going to be a very, very long week. I can tell you that right now. The way this Monday has kicked off, I was all the way up there with y'all early today for that lunch break, and I wanted to bring it to you guys. And oh my God, but if don't nobody else bring their authenticity, I'm gonna always bring the authenticity. I'm gonna bring that raw and uncut. I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. I'm gonna tell you what it is, how I feel, and everything. I'm just waiting on his attorneys tomorrow to cross-examine. I may be feeling some type of way right now because of the way the prosecutors tried to present some things today. I mean, they laid out a lot of people. They put a lot of people on the line prayers are needed more than ever. This case, to me, I still don't see the case, but some things that they did, I feel like they're putting his lifestyle on trial more than they're proving racketeering or RICO, or the things that he's being charged with. I'm not seeing it. This man crossed his T's, he dotted his I's. He was not trying to get in trouble with the law. He was not trying to have any minors around him. These women lied about their ages, and even though they don't care about that, apparently, I mean, it's like they really is coming for chaos. And I felt I'm an energy person, okay, and I need to feel stuff. And so today, if I never felt anything before today, it was a strong day. So with that being said, let's get into this commentary, you guys. I don't want to waste y'all time. So we went over. I'm gonna finish off where I left off at. I know I was discussing the second witness that came after the first witness. I guess her name is Addie. I was calling her Abby, but I guess it's Addie. Okay, so I'm gonna just start back from Derrick Stevens. He was the government's next witness. They laid out all their witnesses today. There's gonna be people names that you're gonna hear that is just gonna, I can't say I didn't tell y'all, because I literally called all their asses the fuck out. Yes, I did. But you guys are going to hear names of the government witnesses. They talked about they have a lot of witnesses to go. So they think they'll be done resting their case. Let me see. I wrote down the date that they think that they'll be turning it over to the defense. Let me see. I want to say, gosh, the 13th. I want to say the 13th. They think they'll be done with their case by the 13th. The judge asked at the end of the court today, how much more time do she feel that the state is going to need, the government is going to need, and they was like, they was being sarcastic as hell. I feel like I'm on trial. Honest to God, I think that's what it is. I feel like I'm on trial, and I think these people are trying to attack me. Okay, and they was trying to really come for me today because they just can't see. They can't handle the smile. They can't handle the happiness. They can't handle the fact that I'm out here bringing this content to y'all, and for the fact that one of the officials said to me they watches my platform and tell me that my channel is full of lies. So I'm like, I don't have to lie. This stuff is what I am writing down coming out y'all courtroom. So for him to say that to me, he knew what he was doing, and I didn't like that, but it was said, and that is what it is. So anyway, the government's second witness after Addie was off the stand, it was Derrick Stevens. He was sworn in. I told you guys he was sworn in. Then they talked about things that the court reporter. It just makes it hard when people are talking over one another. And then they wanted to know, was his microphone on? And they said, "Good morning, Mr. Stevens." And then he said, they asked him, did he have like an AKA name? He said, yeah. And he said, what? It was Davin or Davon Stevens. And then they wanted to know how old he was. He said he was 51. He found, was he employed? They said yes. And then they asked what kind of work did he do. He said he was like in music management and artist management, and he did this for over 30 years. Then they said, did he work with Mr. Kelly? He said yeah. And then he said what kind of work he did for him. He said was professional work with Mr. Kelly. And then he said and then they asked him, did he see Mr. Kelly in the room? He said yes. And then they said, okay, point him out, and then he pointed R. Kelly out. He said he had on the blue suit, and then they wanted to know when was the first time that he met him, and he said 2013 he met R. Kelly. And then they said, okay, so who introduced you to Mr. Kelly? And he said Cheryl Mack had introduced him to Mr. Kelly. And then he talked about, then they had presented an exhibit of Cheryl Mack's picture to confirm that this is the person who introduced him to Mr. Kelly. And then they presented it and they published it to they published it, and then they said, okay, so in 2013, what was the relationship? And then with Cheryl Mackey said, well, she was his assistant, and then she was working for R. Kelly, and then she was working for Steve. I'm sorry, she was working for Steve first, and then she started working for Mr. Kelly pretty much all around the same time. So this is all in 2013. And so then they said, okay, so she started working with you in 2013 as well. So she worked with him in 2013, and she worked with R. Kelly in 2013. And then they talked about some of the things, her job descriptions and duties were to do some day-to-day affairs. And then they talked about she was setting up meetings and things of that nature. That's what he said. And then he was like, she was then they wanted to know, how did he meet her? And he said, through a mutual friend, and the friend name was Lil Ronnie. And then said that Cheryl knew the defendant, Ronnie, and then they was introduced at Lil Ronnie's house. And then they said, where was this located at? He said in Atlanta. And then they talked about the different types of music and business and stuff like that they was involved with, and then some musically other stuff. And then it was like, okay, uh, so basically, mostly they spoke about R. Kelly growing his business, and after meeting with Ronnie at his house, he agreed to bring on some features and some other business deals and things like that. And so and then they wanted to know where some of these where were some of these places that these business deals took place at. He was like in Chicago. And then he said, did R. Kelly he stayed in Chicago? He said, yeah. And then he said, he was changing locations and stuff. And so did he move, and where did he move to? He said he moved to Atlanta. And then he was like, when he moved to Atlanta, where did he stay? And he said that he stayed in a hotel. And then he said, what hotel? He said he think it was the Homewood Suites. And then he said sometimes he would stay with him or whatever, because he used Steve's residence and stuff, and so for recording and for fitness and things like that. And so it went from that. And then they talked about like kind of like describe his house setting and stuff. And then he described his house setting. He said it's on both sides. One side is a studio, on the other side got like basketball NBA courts, is what he said. And then he was just talking about fitness and stuff, and work that he did with Mr. Kelly, and trying to get these business deals with Live Nation, and different type of collaborations, and other business deals with RCA, record label distribution companies. Okay. And then he talked about then they talked about this guy named Paul Casey. And then he was working out. He was doing some type of tour things for R. Kelly, okay, or with R. Kelly, and trying to put together a tour with him and Mary J. Blige. And they asked, if that ever took place, and he said no, it never did take place. And so his testimony wasn't that bad, and it wasn't that long. And then he said no, it never took place. And he said, well, did you set up other deals? There was no tours because they had gave R. Kelly some money. So he was like, well, who got paid the money? He said, well, the first half of the money was paid to Mr. Kelly, okay? And then he said, who else was involved with this? I mean, what other business deals was involved? And then he talked about also helping out with the Black Panties tour, okay? And then they was negotiating with some promoters. Blackie was one of the promoters, and they said, well, who is Blackie? He said, well, he was a partner of CPA, some active business manager, and he was working for Mr. Kelly, okay? And then he said, well, then, who was putting together stuff with RCA. He said, they was doing deals. He said, well, did he work with others? And he said, yeah, he also worked with a woman named Linda Minch, okay, if I'm saying her name right. And then he said they wanted to know who Linda was. He said she was an attorney for Mr. Kelly, okay. And then he said she did like cap shows and was managing and he was also, I guess there was also like a manager for Black Lighting or Black Light. They worked for Mr. Kelly, said the defendant, but they meant to say Mr. Kelly, and he said yes. And then they wanted to present an exhibit, and he said, so like trying to confirm that this is they put up Linda Mitch's photo and wanted to know, this exhibit 44, is this, the person that's in this thing, and the, not the thing, excuse me, in this and the exhibit that they was presenting, and said yes. And said, well, who is this? And he said, this is Linda Mitch, or however you say her last name, so forgive me not saying it right. And so then they asked Canick, did he have anything he wanted to say? He said no objection. So they presented that into evidence of Linda Mitch's photo. And then so they was like, okay, so at some point working with the defendant, did her role change? And they were talking about Cheryl Mack. Did her role change? He said, yeah, she started working for Mr. Kelly, and she started working for Steve. And so, and Steve stopped paying her as well, because she was no longer working for Steve at all. She just pretty much started working for Kelly. And so, did you ever play basketball with R. Kelly? He was like, yeah. He said he said, I played a few rebounds, and kicked the ball out or whatever. He tried to be funny on the witness stand. And then but I didn't find anything funny. And so he was like, okay, so what was the setup? Was like they wanted to know what the setup looked like in terms of inside the basketball area where they was playing basketball at. And so he said, it was like a one-way in and a one-way out type of setting. And so then he went on to discuss like different peoples that was like around, like they wanted to know if he noticed anything strange. And he said, well, he would always, be with other people, like a crowd. He would have women around, people. And then he said, but what was strange to him was the women kind of like felt like they was isolated in a corner. He said, like, if the ball would roll by them, the ball would cross them, and they would look at the ceiling, or they would look at the wall, or they would cross their leg. You know what I'm saying? Like they was just doing all these different things to like not look at the people. And then he said, well, then what would happen when that would happen? And so then they presented another exhibit, and then this exhibit that they presented was exhibit 4, and they wanted to know who Junebug was. And he said Junebug was his security and his personal assistant to Mr. Kelly. And then they presented another exhibit, which was 18, and he said, well, who was Hammer? He said he was also a security for Mr. Kelly. He said, well, did there ever come a time where the business is ended? He said, yeah. And then he said, why? He said, because they was doing some type of negotiation. Why did him and Mr. Kelly's business end with each other? And he said because they were doing some negotiation with RCA, and it was set in to do the red light, and then he sent the invoice, and he first got rejected. So and then they wanted to know about the rejection, and he said, well, they've been sending invoices and not getting paid. And then he was like, so he reached out to the lawyer, and they wanted to know which lawyer he reached out to. He said he reached out to R. Kelly's lawyer, Linda Mitch, and reached out to her personally. And then after he reached out to her, by the time he got a response from her, she did send a letter, but then he actually reached out to R. Kelly personally himself through text messages. He said, well, do you recognize they asked him, did he recognize, this is the prosecutor's witness, and the prosecutor's on the stand right now. So he said, well, do you recognize, your witness? And he said, yeah, not your witness. He said, do you recognize the screenshot? Excuse me. And so they was like, he said, yeah, I recognize it. And he said, what is the screenshot? He said, this is from my cell phone to R. Kelly's cell phone. So then they presented another exhibit, 255A. And so in 255A, it was like, okay, so he sent the text message, said, who is this? He said, who was he texting? He said he was texting Mr. Kelly. They asked him, did he recall the phone number, Mr. Kelly? He said yes. They wanted him to say the phone number. The number was 312-972-7283. And then so he was like, is that the number that you text Mr. Kelly on? He said yes. So then they wanted to present also the exhibit 255B. So, and then 255B, I guess his first text message to R. Kelly, he sent out and was like, so Mr. Kelly, I guess he was like, so what is this? And then he said, this is a conversation that he had with R. Kelly, and this is the screenshot from those messages. And so then they said, so is this black and white message yours or R. Kelly? He said the black and white was the response from R. Kelly, and then the blue highlighted was the response from Steve, sending out the messages and the correspondence. So it started back November 25th of 2014. And so they was working on the renegotiation with RCA, and then and they wanted to know, was this something that you was working on? And then he said yes. And then he said, okay, what do you recall from the whole team was working? He said the whole team was, what he recalled was the whole team was working together, putting out more music. That's what he recalled. And then he said, well, who is her and she? And then he said, Linda, Mitch. And then he said from the bottom of the first page, he agreed to go down by 10, basically. And what that meant, what he meant by that was like to like close out these deals and bring the team together and whatever to keep the team moving, basically. And so he said, and this is my personal opinion, I wrote this, it said, so sounds like these people didn't get paid and they started setting up kills. This is what I interpreted just from that alone. I put that little side note there. So now here's the messages from November the 5th, 2014. He said, King, you still there? And so they wanted to know who was King. King's R. Kelly. He said, so why did you send this message? And then he said, well, he was going back and forth to Chicago and wanted to know, like, and that was pretty much what he responded. And then on March 21st, there was another one. And he said, Steve sent another message out and said, King, you good? And they was like, well, what was this message? He said, because he had not gotten any type of responses, And so he said, when you said King, what did you mean? He said he meant Mr. Kelly. And he sent another message on July 23rd, 2015. He said, you ready? Here I come. And he said, why did you send this message? He said, I think I received a letter from Linda Mitch at this time. And she said in the letter that I am not being compensated. So then by August 2015, he said they wanted him to respond to something, but they said to not mention a certain person's name. And so he said, what was depicted was a rat emoji pertaining something that he mentioned, in this message. And he said, so how did you get this? Like, how did this person find you? He said this person found him through social media. And then there was an objection from Koenig, and that was sustained. And then we went on our morning break, which was like a 10-minute break. I stayed in the courtroom. There was no need to leave for a short 10 minutes. And so then when they came back, he said, so he started showing what is in evidence. They wanted to present another exhibit 25. Do you recognize this person? And then he said, without saying its full name, 75, same photo. And then they wanted and said, this is the same photo from exhibit 75. He said, correct. So the full name is the correct name that is displayed on this individual. He said, yeah, because they're trying to keep out whoever this person was, which it was common sense. It was Jane Doe number 5. Okay. And so said, do you know this person by name? He said, yes. He said, so published to the jury only. So and then he said, so the purpose of this testimony is to have Jane home. He said no, because they was trying to figure out how did they connect. He said, you ever met Jane? And then they started calling her Jane. And he said, yes. He said, when? He said 2820. And so Jane, and then that was just a code they used. And so Jane contacted him through social media. What was the purpose? The purpose of her reaching out, or Jane reaching out, was to help with her career, as this is when 202 is another exhibit. And then from there, the state rested on that alone. So then Cannon came in on his cross briefing. He said it was going to be really brief because he didn't really have a lot for him. So he just talked about the basketball game and the passing of the ball. And then he described for us, he said it's like kind of like a one way. There's bleachers, and then there's a bicycling situation, and then there's like these isolated underneath seats where there's they're underneath where the basketball is. So like the basketball court is here, and then there's like this isolated area where it's underneath the basketball court, and then those chairs is not in the bleachers. And so then mechanic asks, well, did you notice people were smoking marijuana? And he said no. He said, what about drinking? He said no. He said, so was there other celebrities there? He said yes. He said, can you give us some examples of some of the celebrities that was there? He said, well, Usher was there. He said Usher was there. He said also Usher was there. He said yeah. He said they would come to the gym, and they would, they would play basketball, and then there would be a chair that's behind the court. And so Joy would she would she would like she would get out of the way where the balls would come. And then he said, so she would get out of the way where the balls would come. This is Canic on the cross exam. And he said, yes, that's correct. He said, but is this correct? And then he said, yes, that is correct. They would get out of the way. So then he rested. Then the prosecutors came back and said, so where's the chair? Where are these chairs at? And then he said, wait, were there females underneath the basket facing the game? And then passing, yes. And he said, so if they were shooting, then if the ball would no, he said they was like passing the ball, and then they were shooting or whatever, and then the ball would come in their area, and then these girls would just like cross their legs. They would do all other sorts of stuff to kind of like just stay away from the men. This is what he was saying. And so they said, well, who was these girls cheering? He said they was only cheering for Mr. Kelly, okay? And so and then they rested that, and then Canic, he came back. He said, so there was other celebrities there, right? He said, yeah, there was other celebrities there. So there was no females playing basketball, right? No, there was no females playing basketball. So so there's no females playing basketball, and that means there's no females chasing the ball, right? And so he said, no, there's no females chasing the ball. He said, you have any other questions? He said, no other question. And then they rested right there, and then they was done with that particular witness because he didn't really have a lot to offer. So I think what they was trying to get from him was pretty much showing that he didn't get paid for certain stuff, and because he didn't get paid, he was just, to me, this was just the beginning of where all the trouble started coming in for R. Kelly at, before it started getting public about 2015 and 16, and hearing rumors about R. Kelly was messing around with underage girls and stuff like that, trying to get him in the situation that he's in. So now the government called the next witness. They said they were going to call this witness by the name of Lewis. Okay. So they said, good afternoon. He was like, hello. So they had presented an exhibit 64. Said, do you recognize this photo? He said, yes. He said, what is this photo of? He said, this is me. He said, me when? He said, I was around 16 or 17 years old. Okay. And so he said, so in this photo is the same, right? He said, yes. So they presented another 64A, and he said, any objections? Canic said no. So I said, okay, to go ahead and publish this to the jury only, not to the public, but just to the jury. So now only as they're going to present him only as Lewis. He said, okay. So 64B is the same photo. And then he said yes. And so is there any objection? No objection. So he said, how old are you today? And he said, I want to say he said 32, because I wrote 32. So are you currently working? He said no. He said, what kind of work you've done and whatever. He said warehouse management, and wanted to know when he was born. He was born February 11, 1989. And then he said what neighborhood. He said Hazel Crest. And then that was the high school he also went to, was Hillcrest. And then he said, did he graduate? He said yes, back May 2007. Okay, which would have put him at that 17, 18 mark. So you got to remember, you have to remember this date, which is 2007. That's a very important date to remember, because remember, this person was 17, 18 in 2007. Okay, this is really good what what R. Kelly's lawyer did with this witness. So now he said, okay, so 1989, February 18, you was a senior. That was your senior year, right? No, he was born in 89, but February 18th, the 2007. 6, 7. It was a senior year. He said, yeah. So what was his interest? He said football, basketball, and then it was like music and stuff. He said, well, what type of music? He said hip hop. He said he wanted to be an artist. And so then he talked about what jobs he had. He said he worked at McDonald's. Okay. They asked which McDonald's. He said McDonald's on Markham, Illinois. So if y'all know where Markham, Illinois is, and y'all should from Chicago, y'all should know. And so then he was a sophomore at that year when he started working at that McDonald's, and it was 10 minutes away from his high school. And then they had presented a 522A exhibit. He said, do you recognize this? He said, yes. And so they presented also another 522B and said, do you recognize this? We said, yes. What is this? This is McDonald's. He said, is this the one where you worked at? He said, yes. And then they showed this to R. Kelly's lawyer to see if there was any objection. There was no objection. It says, so do you recognize this? Exhibit 1. He said, yes. It said, who is this exhibit 1? Exhibit 1 was R. Kelly. He said, this is Robert Kelly. And so so he said, so where were you when you first met R. Kelly? He said he was at McDonald's, and it was a drive-through window. Is this the photo of the drive-through? And he said, yes. He said, so he was working an overnight shift, and then he said he was working an overnight shift, and it was like not many, but it was a driver. It was a Maybach that pulled up inside of in the McDonald's. It was a Maybach. R. Kelly was in the Maybach. He had a driver, but I guess the driver ended up backing up or something, and that way he was able to get, kills to the window. So he said it was the management that could, he said he asked him, it was the manager, could he hook it up, And so he told her, the guy who sings I Believe I Could Fly, and she was like, yeah. And he was like, Kel said, then Kel's, after he did what Kel's told him to do, he was like, Kel's like, you really did that for me, and was like, and gave him his phone number on 2 pieces of paper. And so one of them was for the manager, and the other one was for Lewis, okay, aka we're gonna get there. And so so then he gave him a piece of paper and was like, this is for you. And then he was like, how old was you? He said he was 17 when he met Kels. He was in high school. He was a senior. He pulled up in a Maybach. What was on the paper? He said his phone number. He wrote his phone number on the paper. Okay. And then he said he went through, he went to throw away the paper, one that was for the manager, the lady, because she said she really didn't even know who he was. So he kept one number for himself, but threw away the number for the other girl or whatever, who R. Kelly was originally trying to give the number to. He said, so he gave the number to his mom. This is Lewis said he gave the number to his mom. He was like, he was present with his mom, called R. Kelly, and then was like, how did you hear it was, and they wanted to know how did he hear the conversation between his mom and R. Kelly? He said, because she was on the speaker. And so after that, then he was like, so he was a big fan. And his mama called him and was like, my son is he's a big fan of you, and he would love to work with you. And he was, and so they made some different arrangements. And so he told his mother and his father they could come up. This is R. Kelly told his mother and his father he can come up. And he was making some beats basically. And it said, so 10 or 2 songs. He asked him how many songs he had. He said 10 or 2 songs. He said, and he attended, and then he said, well, did you ever attend any of R. Kelly's parties? He said, yeah, he attended some of his parties. He said, well, where? In the Olympia Field. And then he said, and then they wanted him to describe, some of the places in his house. He said in the front room, and then he remembers it was in the his mother and his father. They asked him about did he have a step parent? And he said, yeah, he had a stepfather. His biological father was in his life, but he was living with his mom and his stepfather. And he said after he attended the party, he recognized R. Kelly. And they asked him, did he recognize anybody else that was at this party? He said, yeah, who? He said, George Daniels, okay? And so someone who helps, he said, well, how did you know who George Daniels was? Because he said he kind of had a thought of, he knew who he was. And he said, well, he's someone who helps artists develops, artists or whatever. And so then they gave an exhibit, not 90, and said George Daniels. And then it was like what the interaction was. He said his mom told him he was an up and coming artist, and we should get no. This is what George Daniels said, that he was an up and coming artist, and we should try to get him to work with Rob, basically R. Kelly, if that's what he really wants to do. Okay, and then then they took a picture together, R. Kelly and Lewis, and he said he told him in his ear. R. Kelly told Lewis in his ear, it would be best if you come to the party by yourself sometimes. And then he said well, who took the picture of you and R. Kelly? He said George Daniels took the picture. So George Daniels took the picture of Kells, you and Kells or whatever. And then he was like, yeah. And then he said, so George told Kells this kid was really trying to do some music. And so he was like, he repeated it. He said, it'd be best if he, and then he said that R. Kelly repeated it to him, the Lewis, in his ear, and said it'd be best if you could come to this party by yourself, And then he said his mom, and then they asked how did he get to the party. He said his mom took him, and then he said where. He said he took him to the studio and he was present for the conversation. He said yes. And then he said, well, did you go back to his mother? Did your mother go back and bring him? And then he said his mom did. She stayed. Did your mom stay? He said no. She dropped him off at the studio this time and wanted to know, did his mom stay with him? He said no, she didn't stay. He said, well, what did she do? He said she dropped me off at the gate. And then he described the house, the big black gate, and the structure of the home that in Olympic Field. He said, so he recognized the gate in the house, and he said, what was that? He said, that's Robert's house. They presented this, to them. So when you went the second time, was there security at the gate? And then he said, there was a security at the gate. Her name was Candy. He said, well, do you recognize exhibit? And then they presented the exhibit of Candy and was like, he waited a while. And no, he told Lewis to go in the studio, in the room, and basically he was gonna come, and get him in a short while. And so he said he waited a little while, and they said, well, did you really wait a little while? And then he said, yeah, he did. And he said, okay, so and then he said, so what happened when he went to that room? And he was like, basically, he was in there in the studio with other people, and we're going to get to the names next. And then he said, but he took him out and took him, all by himself, basically, in a room. And then he said it was, he started basically filming him. He said, well, what did he use? He said it was a cassette tape. He said he started to, no. I'm sorry. I take that back. This is where R. Kelly gave him a beat and told him, and he put him in the studio and told him, to go rap on that beat. And then he said it was a cassette tape, and he started to rap for him. Okay. And then he said, how did he respond to the instrument? And then he said he told me he had some potentials. Dude has some potentials. And he was like, okay, so he said he put the music roll out or whatever. He had some type of production. And so then he was like, he left for a while. He had something to do. R. Kelly had something to do. He said, so he stayed with Pat and I don't know this person, but Pat and somebody else. And after an hour, Rob said, that he should come back the next day. They put him in another room. They had made a beat and already told him, what to do or whatever. And then he said they asked about his engineers. He told his engineers to let me hear the beat and write a song to this beat. And so then he was like, he went to record the song. And then after recording, then Rob came down the stairs and he played the song for him and said he didn't like the song, just the beat, and never got to the part where he told him to that he should just like put more effort into, his craft. And he was like, he's the king of R&B. And then he was like, well, how old were you? He said he was 17 when he was 17 when when he called him the defendant, but he was trying to say R. Kelly. And then he said was at the Markham uh field house around the corner, because he said he didn't stay that far from that house. Then he talked about Junebug, said if he couldn't reach him, no, he said he was trying to get in contact with R. Kelly. He said, well, if Junebug couldn't reach him, he was playing basketball. And so they had another exhibit, which is 523A, and that was Markham Field House. Okay. And then there was a 523C, which was also a part of the Marco Fields house. Okay. And he said, do you recognize? He said, yes. Who is this? He said, and he presented the exhibit, which was Junebug. He said, do you recognize who this is? He said, yes. He said, who is this? He said, this is Junebug. He said, did you play basketball? He said, not alone. Some ladies, I mean, sometimes. And so then he was like, okay, so there were, they wanted to, he had been something and not anger. He said he hit him up off a late on a week. Wait, hold on, one in a week. He was still interested. He drove to R. Kelly's house, the Olympic field. He was at the end of the garage, and then they wanted him to describe what he saw. And then he said he only the only thing was he needed something. Hold on, y'all. Fantasies of him. Oh, he wanted to fulfill the fantasies of him. He said he was telling R. Kelly he wanted to, he wanted a fantasy to fulfill with 2 or 3 girls or whatever at one time. He said no. He said Kelly crawled down on his knees and gave him oral sex. Okay, and then he said how did he started pulling how did it start? He said he just basically came over there and he, took off, unzipped his pants, pulled it down, and then he was like, did you stay at this house? And he was like, he brought joy as well, and was like, Robert told him, did you hold on, what is this? Did you come to see him? He said he really wanted me. He played 3 to 4 times a week. Okay, they was talking about the basketball when he was playing. And then he said, as a spectator, someone got hurt. June said, give Rich a slot. No, give Rich a shot. Give him a chance. And so he got a call from June. Sometimes he would pop up at the Olympic Field house. This is what Richard Arline turned out to be Lewis. Okay, so if y'all want to know who Lewis is, Lewis turned out to be Richard Arline. He said he played basketball out in it's a street in Chicago called California and Jackson. And then he said others like June Bug did, and somebody named Tom. Okay, so he said, so you went to you went to parties other than with your parents? He said, yeah, he brought friends, and when you walk in, they wanted to know, like, describe the things that he would see. He said when you walked in, they had like this big old shark tank, you know what I'm saying? He said the kitchen was like this way, and then keep going down the hallway, there's a shark tank, a swimming pool that looked like a rainforest. Okay, and then they said, was it an indoor pool? He said yes, it was an indoor pool. And then he went on to say it was and then he said that there was like things there was also a studio at the Olympic he said were there other studios as well? He said yeah, there was studios at the Olympic studio, there was other studios. Ooh, excuse me. He said he would go through the back area to get in, and then he brought he brought his male and female friends to Kel's house for parties. And then they had an exhibit 67. Exhibit 67 was somebody by the name of Akila. He brought her over to Kel's house. And then he said there was no objection. They wanted to bring that on in or whatever so they could discredit it. So then there was another exhibit 91. He said, do you recognize do you recognize this person? He said, yes. Who is this person? This is Kendra. And then it said, Kendra was one that you brought over with you to, to Kells. He said, do you know Kendra last name? And then he presented that. And then there was another exhibit. And then he said, so the same one that he's presented to you, is this the same person that I just showed you? Kendra said, yes. He said, is there any objection? No objection. Then he testified, you brought male friends, right? Yes. And then he said, then there was another exhibit 68. And then he said, this is the government's exhibits. He said, he was young. Um, and then they went to the same high school. Okay. Then they had another exhibit 68. The same photo, yes, showed this time, I think this was the only one. Hold on. Okay, so he said, do you recall the occasion when you brought uh your friends over? And then he said, what stuck out is when he graduated high school and there was a double up um party or record release or something in his house in the Olympic field. He said, did you bring friends? He said, to the double up parties. Yes. Did it show in the exhibit 68 and 67, Kendra? And said, yes. And he said, did she go with you to the double up release party? And he said, yes. And how did you get to the party? He said his mom dropped him off. You couldn't get in. They asked, could you get in without an ID? He said, no. All they needed was the CD of the double up album, and then you was able to get in. As long as they had purchased the CD, that was their ticket of getting in. He said, so his mom took him, then okay, so he said his mom took him then to go get the CD because that was the way, for them to get in, and that was, and so then he said, well, um, did you sign a waiver? He said, did you see some of your friends sign a waiver? And then he said, not really sure what was on it, but they had to sign the waiver. And it says, so 68 shown, which was the Kendra person, but they just use her as 68. It says shown what she went to the double up release party. What, if any, other party did you go to? And he said that was there was another party that Kells was bringing him in with. He said, you be funny keeping bringing him with you. Okay, he was telling him to bring his friend with him. He said, so the common courtesy was to, greet people or whatever and speak when they was all up in his house. So he said, when it coming into his home, and then 68 came back and shared me Rob's number. Oh, 68 is not Kendra. I'm so sorry for mixing up 68. 68 is not Kendra. 68 is Richard Arline's friend, the one that what's her name? Tasha K has showed it on her platform before. She showed you guys who Richard Arline was and who his friend was. Those are the same two pictures that was presented in court today. Okay. And so then, and so 69 came back and showed me Rob's phone number on a piece of paper. And so he was like, in the garage, did you keep, he said, like, he wanted to have sex with Rob. He said, in the garage, did you keep, did you like have sex with Rob? He said, yes. He said, on a tripod and a camcorder and an iPad was recorded. He said, well, how did he record it? And he said, R. Kelly set the camera up. He knows the camera angles was recording the sexual encounters. He told him to call him daddy. Okay. And this is what R. Kelly was telling Richard Arline to call him daddy. As and see, the problem I'm having with this reading is because my pen was going out. Okay, so that blank spot right here, my pen went out, y'all. So I had to write deep into it, and while I had to get another pen, and then after that pen went out, I had to get another pen. So it was getting real up in there, y'all. I have to have like 10 pens when we come tomorrow because I didn't realize all the notes that I was taking. I was running out of ink. Okay, and so let me try to read through what I was writing. So he says, so as the relationship Oh my God, this is gonna be so hard because I'm gonna need to like a pencil this in just to get this out of there. But anyway, he said R. Kelly snapped his fingers 3 times. Robert said a young lady, because he wanted to bring in I believe this is when he wanted to bring in Joy. Okay, they showed Joy on an exhibit. Yeah, we're gonna get there. So he said Rob snapped his fingers 3 times. Robert said a young lady came out from under the boxing ring. He told her to come here. She gave me oral sex. He told her to do it the same to me. He said he do it the same to me as you do him the same way you do me. And then he said, he asked him, did she like it? And do she do it the same? Hold on. And didn't you want it for her to give you oral sex? And then he said, but he said he said, but it made him uncomfortable. It would have been okay if it was just him and her. He was talking about him and Joy. R. Kelly allegedly had Joycelyn give Richard Arline oral sex. Okay. And then he said, so she was she looked like one of the girls from the basketball court. And it was like, and this is before he knew her name and stuff. So this looked like one of the girls from the basketball court. What was she wearing? He said she was naked, and she had on he's no, oh, no. This is the part where he said what she was wearing. She was naked. And then he said that he was intoxicated. He said he got really, really drunk, and then he passed out. He said, and he was in the start. I guess they have these different type of rooms in R. Kelly's house, and so it was kind of like a start or whatever area. And he said, do you remember? And he kind of didn't. He said because he had passed out. He said and Robert was in the room, and he said he remembers saying it was all right. He felt like he may have gave him oral sex while he was asleep or intoxicated. Okay, this is what Richard said. That's when we went for our break for lunch. Okay, so after the break for lunch, they came back and he said, so this is the cross exam. So you testified the first time you testified the first time that you met the defendant, which is R. Kelly, and then the person that he was working. He said, do you remember her name? He said, Valerie. He said, how did she respond? And he said, well, she didn't really know who he was. So, she didn't really, and then he tried to say like he didn't recall. And he said, so what room, a room off, he said, where was the room at? He said it was a room off from the studio. He said, well, what made you think something happened sexually? Okay. And then he said because his pants was unbuckled. And he said, well, do you recall it being unbuckled before he passed out? And he said no. And so then the government presented an exhibit 69. He said, do you recognize her? He said yes. He said, who is this? He said, this is Dominique. And then where do you know Dominique from? Oh, they went to school together. Oh my God. So he said, so they went to school together. So she was younger than you or older than you? He said she was younger than him. And he said by 1 or 2 years. And then he said yes, they discussed it with Dominique. He said he discussed something with Dominique. And then he said they worked together. And he said, where did y'all work together at? He said they worked at McDonald's together. He said they worked together, but it was a different McDonald's, not the same one in the Markham area. And he said, so what caused them to discuss R. Kelly, okay, between Richard and Dominique? And what caused them to discuss R. Kelly? He said, well, he locked his keys in the car. Okay, Richard locked his keys in the car, and then he said he joked that he could call Rob, and Dom said, you know Rob too? That's my boyfriend. She said she could get him to get the doors open as well. So she called Rob, and when she got off the phone, he told her to stay away from Rob told Dominique to stay away from Richard Arline. And it said, did he know they were still talking? Did R. Kelly know that Richard and Dominique were still talking? And said, yes. He said, well, how? He said, well, how did you hear that Kells know you and her were still talking? And she said, to Dom. And then he was like, well, she was on the phone with him with Dominique was on the phone with R. Kelly, and when you was on the phone with her, he said she dropped the phone, and Kells got on the phone and kept saying hello, 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 and then he basically he hung up the phone, and he was like, well, they known each other several years for working at McDonald's. He said, well, Kells didn't want anything to do with him after that, and he was like, he wasn't sure why he was no, then they talked about his arrest record. So he said, he was arrested, and he said yes. He said, did you do it? He said yeah. He said he committed a robbery, and I want to say robbery and forgery, I believe. I wrote the charge down right here. So he said he took a plea deal. He got 5 years probation. Other people were charged. They asked, did other people get charged in the robbery as well? He said yes. Then there was another exhibit 68. And then he said, is this the same person charged with the robbery? And this is the crazy part, how this connection is. These pieces of the puzzle comes together, because the same person that he committed the robbery with is the same person who's claiming that R. Kelly sexually assaulted him as well, allegedly. But it hasn't come out yet, but Richard R. Line has. So he said, so is this the person charged with the robbery? He said yes. So the defendant showed they showed the defendant and asked, have he seen him? And then Robert said, why was he still in there? He said, oh my God, I don't have that. And then he gave him an amount. Okay, so so Richard got out of the situation and got probation because he took a plea deal. The other guy that's going to be John Doe number 2, I'm assuming, he basically he was still in jail and said that he needed to get out of jail. So they asked R. Kelly for some money, and how much was it to get him out of jail? And R. Kelly's like, oh my God, I don't have that. I guess it was a really lot of money. So then R. Kelly ended up giving Richard $2,000 to get the dude bailed out of jail. And they asked Richard, what did he do with the $2,000? Did he bail the dude out of jail? Richard did not bail the dude out of jail. Richard actually kept the $2,000 for himself. Okay. And then he said he kept the money. And then he said, well, was your friend ever eventually released from jail? He said, yeah, he was released at some point on bail. And then 2018 was a relationship with Kells. And then he said, great, bring more friends. Great, more like friends. He asked what type of friendship him and R. Kelly had. He said it was a great friendship. It was more like friendships or whatever. And he said, so in 2018, they played basketball at the basketball place, and then outside of basketball they had a relationship as well. So then he said, well, they would be at parties, cigar lounges, out of town, and parties and studios in Chicago, or just in the studios, and they wanted to know like where these other studios were located. Okay. Then my pen went out, y'all. This is the notes. Okay, so this was the judge wanted to know how much longer. She said the week of the 13th, the government will be done with their witnesses. So around the 13th, and I don't know how long. Kanik and them is going to go on as far as bringing in their witnesses. So anyway, it's safe to say I don't think. I'm not gonna say Joy ain't gonna come soon, but we just have to wait and see, because they still have a little bit of time to play with. So he said, so you and the individual 68 were in the same place after the Olympic field? And he said yes. And they wanted to know where. He said the Trump Tower with Kells. He called and said they needed to fix. He said R. Kelly called Richard and told Richard, him and the other dude that allegedly is John Doe number 2 of the boys, said that R. Kelly said they needed to fix their situation. They were more like brothers. And so then so he said, so before lunch, 68, because we went to lunch and now we back from lunch. And then so now they presenting another exhibit 68. So Kells' house is this the best friend? And then he said yes. And so after saying R. Kelly said you need to fix the relationship, they both rode down to the Trump Tower, and then R. Kelly allegedly instructed each of them to kiss and touch on each other. Okay. And then he said he claimed to sit and watch Kells and number 68 to do kiss and touch each other in his private area is what he said. He said he didn't want to do that, and he said, and they asked him, did he not want to do that? He said no. So did he said, what about, did 68 appear to want to do that? He said, since they not, and then R. Kelly allegedly said, since they not doing what is told, R. Kelly told him in 68, let's show him how it's done. Since Richard and the other alleged person did not want to kiss and touch on each other, R. Kelly allegedly took the other boy and said, let's show them how it's done. And so he said, what happened after that? He said, well, he saw them having sex together. And then he said, well, he was instructed to go to the bathroom. And then he said, who told you this? He said, R. Kelly. He said, well, who appeared to be in charge? He said, R. Kelly. He said, how so? He said, because he told us what to do. And so then number 78 was Richard had sex with Joycelyn. Did you know her name? He said, no. At the studio on Justin Street in Chicago. Y'all should know these streets. I don't know Chicago like that just yet, but I'm figuring it out. So on Justin, and he said they were hanging out at a cigar bar and went to the studio. And he said, well, who was at the studio? He said Robert was there, Julius was there. They said, well, who is Julius? He said he's an AR. And he said, okay, so Julius from the parties. And then he said, yeah. And then he said, okay, so did y'all go back to the studio on Justin Street? And then it said, ask R. Kelly now for the music, and sat at the bar, want to go back. And then R. Kelly started to doze off. He said they were sitting on the couch in the studio. It was the main studio. And then he said there was engineering. They asked what other stuff was in there. He said it was engineering. There was a mixing board. There was other materials and a keyboard. And he said, where was Julius? He said Julius was on the couch. And then they said this was instead they went into another room. And then he said R. Kelly took him into another room instead. And he said Julius stayed in the studio. And then he said he wanted him to have sex with his girlfriend. And then they said, well, did you really stay in there for how long? He said like 10 or 15 minutes. He said, well, he left him for a minute. That's when they said, well, how long? He said 10 or 15 minutes. He said he brought me back. When he came, he brought back joy. Okay. And he said prior to this 78, he never seen her or met her just from basketball. And so 78 came into the room. He instructed her to give oral sex. And that's when Joycelyn gave oral sex. He said, how was she dressed? She had on a t-shirt and she gave him oral sex. And R. Kelly was recording it on an iPad. Okay. He said, how could you see that he was recording on the iPad? He said, well, he was on the chair. He said he was on the chair and Joy was on her knees. And he said, well, could you see what was being recorded? He said, no. He said, why? He said, because he was fucking him. Wait, hold on. Because he was, oh no. Oh, because he was facing the camera was facing R. Kelly, so he couldn't see what he was recording. He said, but he told Joycelyn to call him daddy and call him by his name, to call him daddy. And it was like, who was giving instructions? And he said, R. Kelly. He said 78. So saying during the encounter, she did as she was told and called me daddy. He used real names. Yes. How did you respond when 78 gave him oral sex? So they gave her number 78. So how did you feel when 78 gave you oral sex? He said he couldn't get excited. Richard said he couldn't get excited because Rob was standing right there, and he didn't want this to happen, is what he claimed. Then he said he confused because he don't know what he want. Rob allegedly told Richard he was confused and he don't know what he want, if he wanted a woman or a man. And then he said, you testified about studio and Olympic and Justine and another studio on Ohio Street in Chicago. He said, have you taken anything from R. Kelly? Have you taken anything from R. Kelly? And he said, yeah. He said, what? He said he took a camcorder from R. Kelly. He said, well, when did he take it? He said, when him and his friends were at a party. He said he asked one of the runners about it. They said someone left it for days at the house in Olympic Fields. And he was just him, and somebody left it at the Olympic Fields, and it was just him rehearsing. Later, his friend said, give it back. Number 68 said, give it back. 68 said, give it to Kels. Okay. Anything else he took? He said, anything else you took? He said, no. He said, the last time he saw Kels, and he said, when was the last time you saw? And he said, the last time he saw Kels? He said, yes. The last time was at where? He said, at the Trump Tower. He said, what led to that? He said, Kels said he needed to see him at the Trump Tower. And they said, where? He said, in Chicago. So he said, well, who, if anyone else, he only saw Kels. They sat in the hallways. He don't remember he said he don't remember the floor in the hall. He don't remember the floor, but in the hallways outside, Kels had a notepad and a pen. He needed him to protect him, he said. He said he wrote the letter. He gave him the notepad and wrote it. Kels told him word from word. Some people some people did this to pay off he had him do this to pay off, so that way for having had a sexual relationship. He said he did not indicate he had any type of contact with him. And he said no. He said, did anyone try to pay him? He said no. He said for Kel's protection. It was for Kel's protection. Sexual encounters that he had. He said he told one about. They asked him, did he tell anybody about these letters? He said, yes, I told one person. And he said, who? He said he told 68. So he said when they said, well, when did you tell 68 about that letter? He said when he told him he had to write a letter, 68 told him he had to write the same letter. And then he said they asked about his mother and his stepfather and the relationship that he had with his parents, and then his biological father, he would see him on the weekends. Then he said, did you know she was recording? And then he said, yes. He said, what did you offer her? Oh, so that now they're talking about Jane Doe number 5, and said, when he was trying to get the money out of her, did he know she was recording? And he said, yes. He told R. Kelly's lawyer, yes, but then he flipped it over and said no after they went back over. But anyway, he said, yes. What did you offer her to not cooperate with the government? And he said, well, were there charges? And he said, he was charged with a charge. Well, he was charged, what was it? Oh, he was charged with bribery. And he said Kels was not a part of the bribery charge. He said he had and then he said, well, whose idea was it? And Richard said it was his own idea. R. Kelly didn't have nothing to do with him bribing. He says, so charged with an attempt bribery, and you pled guilty, and you're facing 15 years. And then he said they wanted him to cooperate. Just be truthful. Do he want to be here today? He said no. He said, so he'll receive a letter. He'll receive a letter to the judge, telling everything that he's done. And then he said he don't know what sentences will be like. And so he said, well, do you remember your biological father number? He said, yes. And then they presented a 953 evidence, 953A, which was his father's number. And he said, were your biological parents married? And he said in high school, he remembered these numbers, and then it was like 9530 was his stepmother's phone number. And then they talked about 2006 when he first met R. Kelly. And then he said how regularly a lot he remembers some phone numbers a lot, and some numbers of multiple numbers. He said there was multiple numbers, but he said one particular number stood out the most, and they asked him which one it was. He recalled 630-220-1166. And he said, "What did you see him carrying?" He said, "A backpack." And he said, what was in the backpack? He claimed there was iPads or money that came out of this backpack. And then he said R. Kelly took out the iPad from the backpack, offered money and then he offered money to a witness on his own, which was Jane Doe number 5. He said he still wants to make it now Arline said he still wants to make it in the music industry, but he knows his reputation is basically gone in a bad way. Like it's messed up. So Cannon came in and said, "You testify, you're here on a cooperation agreement. When did you agree to cooperate?" And then he said February 21st, 2021. He said, "Well, did you have a meeting, and how many meetings did you have with the government?" And then he acted like he said he couldn't remember. Then he said, "Well, did you have 1 or 2 meetings and then started cooperating?" He said, "Well, didn't you tell them you about the bribery to benefit the person needing the money?" So he did it to benefit like Jane Doe number 5. He was trying to help Jane Doe number 5 get some money, basically. But his thing was he wanted to get some of the money as well. Okay. And so he said, "Well, didn't you tell them you that you was trying to benefit from the person that needed the money?" He said, "The person asked for $2 million. Yes, I did. After you extended to get the money, after you tried to extend them to try to get the money." And he said, "Yes." He said, you said to the government they will write a letter. Am I correct?" And then he said, the one who decides if you're being truthful. And then he said, "No, not that wasn't my statement." He said, "Well, someone has to evaluate if you were telling the truth and what the government wanted him to know." He says, "So don't the government find to be the truthful and to find you to be truthful?" And then he was like, "Yeah." He said, "So now if you don't tell a story of what the government says to be truthful, part of you getting this letter is you being here and telling this story in order for you to get this letter that they're going to write for you." And he said, "And if you're not telling the truth on how they want you to tell it, you ain't going to get this letter." And so he was like, "So I asked you, did you know what you were saying? Did you know what you were signing, you and your attorney?" And he said, "Yes, sir. To make sure you know what you were signing." And he said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, did you know what the letter is called?" And then he said, it's your I don't know what the hell I wrote right here. It's your hope. He said, "You don't know, you don't want to go to jail. In accordance to what the government wants the truth to be, you told the government you tried to help this person. No, that's not the case. Do you recall telling the government at the conversations you was trying to help this person? You wasn't trying to help this person. You were trying to help yourself." And he said, "Yeah, I was trying to help myself." He said, "So you were lying when you said you was trying to help this person, right?" And then he said, "I said I was trying to help myself and that person." And he said, "I thought that person had some tapes on me or on me. Did you tell the government this?" He said, "I'll give you the paperwork." He said he had a couple of interviews and they was nerve-wracking with the government. And so he said, "I want to show him the judge does." He said, he was like, "I want to show him to bring back his memory." And then that's when the judge, she was like, does he need to take a look at every single one?" And this is kind of irritating me for the judge to just kind of like shut down when Kanik was really on fire and bringing a lot of understanding to this witness about how this witness was trying to utilize all this information to lie to the government just to get himself out of the bribery charge that he caused upon himself and that he's responsible for. And R. Kelly didn't have nothing to do with it because R. Kelly was in jail. There was no communications. And so anyway, that's what that was all about. And so he said, so I said, I don't remember. This will help you remember. He said, I believe I did. And then Caddick said, well, we want you to go through the stack of papers, and then the government will that's when the government, I believe, they stepped in and they said it's not there. And he said, well, you testify. He said, well, how much money did you try to get? He said $200,000. Or was it $2 million? He said, well, Jane Doe number 5 asked for $2 million. You wanted to hope to get some of that money. You were hoping to get a kickback, and you hadn't had any discussion on what you were going to do. And remember when Richard asked R. Kelly to bail out 68, R. Kelly said that was way too much money, but what R. Kelly did was gave the dude $2,000 to get dude out of jail, and Richard ran off with the money. So who's to say that this bribery that Richard was calling himself doing, that he wasn't gonna do the same thing to Jane Doe number 5? He was gonna run off with the plug. You feel me? He was gonna do it twice because he's already done it once before. And so then he said, you had another scheme. This is Candy said, you had another scheme going on. He says, you tried to get a book deal. And then he said, yes. He said, we talked about it. He said, you tried to get a 20% off a book deal. And he said, after Rob was in jail, and yes, a book deal. Yes, the bribery. And then the damn judge, she always be trying to stop some stuff in the middle of the testimony. He said, so you testified about bribery. When you were incarcerated after your arrest, you never was in jail. He said you was in jail for a couple of hours. And did you cooperate on the date of your arrest? And then he said, yes. He said, but did you get a bail? He said, yes. And so then he went on to say, this stuff is, so he said, so you never spent the night in jail. You spent 2 hours and then you immediately started cooperating. This is his R. Kelly lawyer was telling this to him, like, you immediately started cooperating. And then he was like, you testified earlier on direct exam. There was a time you visited Robert and you visited Robert and he let you into the gate. Yes. He said, and then this is they want to find out where was this at in the government's where was this evidence at in the government's record? He said in page 3 of 10. He said, so you told them Candy who worked at the security at the gate, it was always at the gate. So he said that day this encounter for Kels, Kels let him in. He said, but Candy who works there for Kels, Candy who gets Kels to to open up the gate. And then he said somebody named Harvard Kelly opened up the gate on the date Kels opened up that gate. And then he said, did you tell the government that on page 3 of 10 Candy opened up the gate? He said Candy who works security for Kelly would normally open up the gate. He tried to switch it up and say normally, okay? And then he said, you testified that the MC, the McDonald's encounter, you said Rob gave you 2 pieces of paper. He said, then he went back to Candy. He said, well, normally Candy does some other security. Normally she'd be the one to open up that gate. He said, well, when you would go to his home, he never asked you for ID. Richard said no. He said, well, when your mother, your stepfather, did they ask? He said, I don't believe so. He said, well, did you sign a non-disclosure? He said, but you never, he said he signed a non-disclosure, but you never gave him an ID at the first party. No second time. The first time in the no, nothing in the Christmas season. He said you saw a Christmas tree, and he said it was cold. It was cold, and you was he said, and you was around 16. He said, I believe I was 17. He said, well, didn't you tell the government that you was 14 years old? He said, you don't have no recollection of who you was or how old you was. He said 14. He said, do you recall saying you was 16 then 14? He said, did they tell that it's a federal offense to make it's a federal offense to make a false statement. He said, didn't the government tell you this? He said, he don't recall. Then he said, the young lady named at McDonald's, you said her name was Valerie, right? Her name was Violet. And then he was like, Valerie and Violet are two separate names. Do you have a record? Do you have a record? Do I have to reconcile? Refreshing you, your memory. He said, isn't it a fact in one of those meetings you said you could wait? He said, in one of those meetings you said you could get Violet's number. You made Valerie. You made Valerie up. And then he said, and then the judge, she actually quoted it too. She was like, so did you make up Valerie? And then he was like, we talked. He really didn't respond to that. They kind of tap dance around it because, like I said, the government was coming in and shutting a lot of stuff down. I see how they moving. He said, so you made Valerie up. The more we talk, no, this one he said, this was his response. He said, the more we talk, the more it's starting to come back to me. He said, when's your birthday? He said, February 11th, 1989. And then Cannon said, what's your date of birth? And then that's when he said it again. He said, so you told the government when you was about 17 or 18 years old, R. Kelly recorded you on an iPad. Do you remember that? Is that correct? And he said, correct. Now, this is where I told you guys in the beginning of this commentary to remember he was 17 and 18 around 2007. Okay. Now I'm about to tell you guys about the 2007 and why I wanted you to remember 2007. The reason I wanted you to remember 2007 because R. Kelly's lawyer said, well, one of those ages that you said R. Kelly recorded you on an iPad, and did you know that the iPad didn't come out until 2010? I said, oh, they got this live motherfucker. They got him, man, because he acted like that that the iPads came out in 2007 when they never came out until 2010. That's when the iPads actually came into an existence, okay? And so so the mechanic said, one of those ages that you said Kelly recorded you on the iPad, did you know the iPad was released in 2010? As you got older, you said Kelly recorded you on an iPad when you were 17 or 18. He said, my question is you told the government Kelly recorded you on an iPad. Let's see if this refreshes your recollection. 17 or 18, Kelly recorded you on an iPad in a sexual encounter. And he said, and again, when the government told you during your with your attorney, when your attorney was there in some of those sessions, okay, he said, was he there the second? He said, my lawyer wasn't there the first time. He said, well, was he there the second time? Yeah, they did tell you to be truthful now, didn't they? Yes. Did they? He was like, did they? Oh, wait, he said, did they do anything to help your he said, did R. Kelly do anything to help your music career? He said, yes, he played beats and he had me record on the beat. He said, well, how long you been on your music? How long you been, doing your music career? And then he was like, for sure, like a few or whatever. He was like, what's the name of the song that you ever made? The nigga couldn't think of a song. He was trying to think of something. And he said, well, what's the name of the song you ever made that you got out? He said, Doodoo Dash. And then he said, so you recorded, you got a record out here with a record company. He said, did you work with did you work with? He said, he don't remember. He said, so you don't remember the producer of Doodoo Dash? And he was like, according to you, you told the government that this letter, yeah, he said, yes, sir. That R. Kelly told you to write this letter. He said, yes, sir. And you did it. Yes, sir. And then he said, you in this other person, 68, tried to repair this relationship. Do you remember the year? He said he don't remember. He said, well, you don't remember. Well, how old were you? And then he couldn't remember that either. He said, according to you, these encounters you don't recall. And he said, well, have you released anything? Have you released anything? And then he said, that made the charts, that made the top charts? And then he said no. And then he said, well, did you make any money? He said, yeah. He said, well, how much you made? He said, the bare minimum. He said, well, what's the name of the song? And then the prosecutors mad as hell at this point. They was like, objection. And then they was like, sustained. So they didn't let him answer. So then he had to rephrase it. He said, so you released, he said, what year did you release your song? Doodoo Dash. That nigga said this year, y'all. This year, okay? This year. And so then on cross, he said on certain statements that refreshes wait that wait. He said on cross on certain statements that's reason because Candy, well, let me see. Do you have been on a report? He said report yes or cross yes. Hold on. Make this make sense. So many damn notes. I'm not even done, y'all. I literally am right here, and we got all of this because I said I was doing front and back, y'all. Y'all can see I was doing front and back, so it's a lot of stuff to get to. So y'all just gotta bear with me. So just hang on in there, y'all. Just hang on in there. Doodoo Dash. He called it Doodoo Dash. He was thinking of something quick because they be always talking that dookie talk, you know what I'm saying, and just lying. And so anyway, he said, so did you recall the first encounter? And then he said, who let you in? And he said, Candy. He said, but who let you in? He said, Art Kelly. This is the cross. They went back to try to clean up the statement. He said, so just as you testify, he said, you just testified. He said, yes. You were asked about your participation of the bribery. He said, yes. He said, did you know those calls were being recorded? He said, no. And he said, did you know the person who was cooperating with the government? He said, no. Was that a book deal for you? He said, no. You weren't going to expose what Kells had did to you at the age of 17, was you? And he said, no. He said, well, how long you've known Kells? He said, about 15 or 16 years. And he said, was there a camcorder or an iPad? He said, first to say that there was just a recorder, a camcorder came before the iPad. They was trying to get him to go back and fix up what he had messed up on, okay? And so then he said, well, individuals at McDonald's who was in individuals named Valerie. What do you remember about her? He said, she was my manager. You don't remember except she was your beautiful manager. He said she was beautiful. He said, you were asked on cross, do you recall these? And then he said, yes. Did you know you would get arrested that day? He said, no. When you first met R. Kelly in high school? Yes. Did you remember the what year? He said, no. He said he remembered he was high school. It was his senior year. And then he said, hold on. Did that help your memory? Did that help you remember the point in the time? He said, yes. You were asked on cross. You offered money to a prospective witness. If the witness agreed to pay the monies, if the witness agreed to have paid the money prior to the arrest, who had you told? He said, no one. He said, is this easy for you to discuss today? He said, no. People may think I'm bisexual. Before cooperating, no. His wife, no. He said he didn't tell his family, his wife, nobody. He didn't tell nobody after that. So then Kenny did another cross. That was the prosecutors came back trying to go back and forth off of each other. And so then the government went over your statement. You made then, and the prosecutor and wait, you made a statement then, and then the prosecutor said, Candy, The government said in the government's report, it said that Candy, who worked for Mr. Kelly, was the one at the gate. And he said Candy, who works security for Kelly, was at the gate. And then he had pulled up his statement at this point, you guys. He said, "So were you just asked about devices? Isn't it a fact you told the government 17 or 18 Kelly recorded you on an iPad? Government asked if you were aware, correct? You wouldn't dare try to offer a bribe, correct?" And then he said, but you knew you were committing a crime, correct? And he said, yes. And then he said the person who gave the young lady the person that gave the young lady the hookup, was you in fact uh he said, yes, sir. And he said the name was Violet, the person that R. Kelly asked you to give the the hookup to. In fact, her name said the name was Violet. He said, yes. And he said, well, step down, witness. Thank you. And then he said, thank you, Your Honor. And they was pretty much done with him at that point, because he just went back and forth with too many different conflicting statements on the lady's name and all this, that, and the other. Okay, so now the government is calling their next witness. Okay, this is where it gets really, 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 really serious at. So this witness is Suzzette Mayweather. Okay. And then they said, where was you from? And she said she was from Houston. They said, how many siblings you have? She said 3. They asked her what was her nickname. She said twin. And then they said, what was your sister name? And she said Alizette or Al. Don't get me to saying her name wrong. And they said, do you have the same last name? She said yes. And this is where I was going back and forth from writing front to back, because I was running out of paper and wasn't sure if I was going to have enough to get all these notes. But she's still on the stand. She's there. She's not done. I'm not done, because I still have all these notes to finish up with you guys. I'm trying to get through these notes because I need to get a little bit of rest. So this is where we at right here on this particular page. And so I have like one front and back. Let me see. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, 12 more pages, okay? We're almost through, you guys. We're almost through. Chicago fucks with R. Kelly. And Chicago knows R. Kelly, but you continue to learn the king of R&B on social media. Okay, so what I'm going to do right quick before I finish and get into this next before I get into this next witness, I want to start reading some of y'all comments and shouting y'all out, because I see y'all up in here and I want to make sure I'm shouting y'all out. So I see you, Big Vi opinion. Just because we don't agree with some actions of other people doesn't make their actions a crime. And then Miss T's in the building. And then Princess D says, Canic not playing. Arissa says, got him. Lady Earth say, got him. Lil Rico says, lies. I Ride Solo say he going to jail anyway. Georgia girl, I am every woman. The dream team's in the building, says, boom. Cooper got the popcorn. Zola says, go Canic. Ivan says, Canic is not to F with. Gigi, right? Princess D.I. Cora says, wow, wow. The truth says, Shante, I know all of them old men was freaking little girls in Chicago, and so was R. Kelly. You can't tell me nothing but anything that went down in Chicago, babies. Zola says perjury. Minecraft says wow. Felicia Fee say LOL. Big Vi opinion said, if this defense team had this case from the jump, it would be a trial. And then Gigi says Canic is the S. Miss T, I Ride Solo. Princess Di, every woman the dream team said right. Big Vi pieces in this puzzle said doo doo dash. Now that's nasty. Regina White say damn. Gigi is laughing out loud. Shantae says the truth, sure. Kimberly Nicole says iPads were not invented in 2007. Miss T said those lies are catching up with them. Arissa says LOLB. Shirley Williams said the government ain't proved nothing. Lady Earth said doo doo dash. Arissa said laugh out loud. Georgia girl says laugh out loud. Tip love laugh out loud with the eyes. Zola says truth, that's all over the world. Older men like younger women, and older women like younger men. Okay, so hold the back door wide open. Nah, I'm just playing. So and then there's some bombs. And she said, I know. Truth said, I know. Arissa's laughing. Tippy said, that's crazy. Gigi said, exactly, Vi. The truth says Zola, including R. Kelly. Miss T said doo doo what? And then Ironic Solo said lying. Mrs. Cece said, I don't think the first model had a camera either. Then Shirley said, Big Vi, hello, exactly. And Juicy Love says, truth, if you something. Miss T, you are doing great. They said Canic ain't the one to play with. Ironic Solo said, Miss T. Princess D said, right, Canic ain't playing Nicole either. Shantae say, BIG, right, because they railroaded him. I don't know what people might think he did, all because they're from Chirac as well. What he's on trial for, he's innocent, period. Shantae said, as well, not as well. Zola said, yeah, they like using that word. Regina says, I'm dead. Nene says, wow. The truth says, Shantae, now. Pooh. Juicy Love says, truth, if you really know that R. Kelly molested young girls, then why didn't you go testify for the prosecution? Shantae said, truth, prove you know, Pooh. Regina said, doo doo dash. Monet says, hey, boo. Hey, boo. All right, Solo is laughing at Regina. Juicy Love. Truth says, Juicy Love, if I'm asked, I will. Shantae say, truth, unlike y'all, I don't go by hearsay. I'm not gullible. Sorry, Pooh. Um, then we have Regina said, well, his wife will know now. And said, I bet as had that song on repeat, doo doo dash. Mac Diamond in the building. Regina says, what are these people fascinating with? Mess, I don't know. Check out my channel. You don't know what to go off of because we're not there. Let's be realistic, sweetie. Peace in this puzzle said, didn't Larry say, didn't Larry say he knew all this? Or he set this up. This is a poor case for government, not looking good. Let me see. She don't know. Laugh aloud. She go by hearsay. That's creditable. Truth, you could have called Kim Fox hotline number. You could have also testified in 2008 trial. Gigi said that's why the prosecutors got all that stuffing. Lie, no cameras, no press. Can't bring up the accuser's past criminal history. Keep the parents out of the court. Unbelievable. Oh, wait. Keep the parents out of the court. Unbelievable. Oh, comments went up so fast. I don't even know where I was at. Oh my God. Okay. I think I was right here. The parents out of the court. Unbelievable. Oh, so you can perjure yourself and get away with it. Terrible. Shantae Brown, Chicago Fox with R. Kelly. Okay, I said that one. Damn, Canning made her crumble. Take your time, Hollywood next. Thank you, Big Red 69. Chi-Town, Lil O, R. Kelly is going to be the one to bring down the Me Too movement. Free Kelly. MacDine hit that like. He was clearly lying. Wow, she lied and said she was involved in nothing with the case. Grace, I was boo sorry. Mocha Chocolata, hey boo. Q Ball Davis says hello. Jay Freeback, y'all, you tell the truth. Joyce Bryan says, what subjects of Diamond's lovely platform? Keep up the good work. Hey, next, long do the trial going to, how long the trial going to last? It looks like it's going to go a little bit past the 13th, that's for sure. And then R. Kelly's lawyers still have to, bring in their witnesses and stuff. So it's gonna be a minute, y'all. I can tell y'all that. Let's see. Uh, let's see. Hey, next, how long? Okay. I was at the RRMCD. Let me see. Dennis Jones, California. Arissa says R. Kelly is innocent. Shantae says truth. Give it up. Who is okay? Larry Cox says facts. Arissa says not one person told the truth. Beverly says go Canic. Shirley said free R. Kelly. Trina says free R. Kelly from Chicago. Monet says free RSK. Team Truth should have been Team Jim. This is Big Vice. Comment Shantae him being locked up. Sis, my proof. That girl, this is sad. Little Rico, free R. Kelly, Orgasmic. Hey, next. Hey, now. Yellow Michelle. Hey, Yellow Michelle. Free R. Kelly, sweet lady, says hello. Nene says, wow. Tip Love too said, you are doing a great job. Thank you, love. Callie say, oh my God, sis. Hey, I'm super late. I'll catch the replay. Thanks, sis, for the update. Juicy Love says, truth, really, nobody cared what Chicago know when they didn't and still haven't spoke up about the young girls who Robert allegedly molested. You are steady repeating the same mess, but no proof. Okay, Team Libra says awesome reporting. Government got a liar for witnesses. You need to be on court TV reporting. Good job, Hollywood Next. Thank you, GA girl. Trina says I ain't never liked a young dude. My friends and I all had grown dudes, and so did half. These people, mamas and grandmas, was with older dudes. Corinne Harris says, share, because I am. Thank you, Hollywood. You welcome, love. Shante say, truth, yeah, you slow. Okay. Monet says, look at the timing, masked man locked up trying to hide out. I'm just saying. Nestor Fleming, Furmis says, why are the defense bringing up a plea deal with the male accusers and the prosecution? Big Red says, do we not see what the government is doing to our people? The Black Panthers, Malcolm X, MLK, MJ, Prince, the truth, JL, the proof is in the paperwork. Just for me, Kel's house was on MTV Cribs. Whoever watched it saw the entire house. Trina says, but if there's evidence that the conflicting statements are linked to witness intimidation, it actually becomes evidence. McDonald's is the easy restaurant to remember. Awesome commentary, says Miss Dunkins. Thank you, baby. Star Child said, a piece of the puzzle. You take fantastic notes. The hell with transcripts. Old guys still do sleep with young girls, but Rob is not on trial for statutory rape. They know they have no proof to convict Rob. The sex trafficking and RICO charges is ridiculous. Doodoo dance. I really appreciate you, Dex. I'm trying to get to all of them, but something I hit and it just disappeared. Okay. So let me just get back into this. I tried to read y'all comments. Y'all got them coming in, so I appreciate everybody that's commenting in the chat, and I want to thank everybody that came over here, subscribe to this platform, because again, like I stated, I will be doing all my lives moving forward from here. And so now I want to get into the last witness, because she's still on. The prosecutor is still. Cross-examining her, and so they should be done with her by lunchtime, and I'm assuming when they're done with her, then Kanick is going to get his chance to go at her, or whoever they send at her. But this is deep right here, y'all. So this is the part that y'all need to really pay attention to, because this is going to be a lot of name dropping by this witness and a lot of stuff. Okay, so now we're talking about the next witness, which is Suzzette Mayweather. Okay. And then they put an exhibit up, and they said to identify the person. Oh, excuse me. Identify the person in the exhibit, which was her sister, that they identified. And then they said, how far did she go in school? She said college. They asked her what did she take up. What did she take up? She said biology, and then they wanted to know, did she graduate from that? And she said yes. Okay, and then they said, are you an employee? Are you employed? And she said yes. And then they wanted to know, what did she do? And she said management, constantly consulting assistant. And then they wanted to know, did she work for R. Kelly? They presented an exhibit 1, and then she said yes. Then they said Rob, and they said what was his last name. She said Kelly, and she said Rob Kelly in person, yes. And then they want her to identify him, and then she pointed him out with the suit in the blue. And then they said how long has she known him? She says it's the early 90s or the late 90s. And then they wanted to know, how did she know him? She said they had a mutual friend. Band members. And then she said they wanted to know, how did they first meet? And then she said they first met him, and then and she said she first met R. Kelly, which was in London. They wanted to know, what was she doing over there in London? And then he said wait, in London, and for Rob's show. And then she said prior to meeting Rob, maybe hold on, maybe she stated, I was a fan, and they said no. And they said after London, and she said yes. Were other shows? She said yes, outside of his what was this? outside of his. Oh no, I said, is that correct? And she said yes. And he said, how you, um, something. Oh my God. My own writing on this one is terrible. Said, how long have you known him? And then she said, no, how would you describe him is what it was. It said, as a friend. And she said, where have you been to any of his places? She said, yes, in Olympia Fields outside of Chicago. And she said she first visited when a friend passed away. And they said, well, who was his friend? And the friend name was Janky. And then she said also through Bubba and Jave or Jive. Come to find out, and it said who is you still associates with. She said she was still in association with Bubba and Jive, and then she said, well, do you know their real names or who they are? And then she said they were brothers. So Bubba and Jive are brothers. Okay. Said, do you what is this? Do you something to see? Do you continue to see our Kelly? And then she said yes. And how do you continue? How do you see him? And then she said, like a friend. She said, they said, did you ever something with R. Kelly? She said yes. Did you ever? What is this? Something with R. Kelly. Yes, while working with, I think, wait, let me read more. Yes, while working with him, it said, yes, at some point, did you start working with R. Kelly? And then she said, yes, in 2015. And then said, what did you do for him? She said she was his personal assistant. And then she said they asked her how long did she work? And she said she worked 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. And then they said, when you wasn't working in 2 weeks, who was working for him? She said her sister was. And then she said, do you have any agreements or did you have any agreements, and how much did you get paid? And then she said $800 weekly. And then there was other expenses. And she said Rob covered travel and stuff like that. And then so they started talking about some dates. October 2015 until February 2017 is when I guess she stopped working for him in February 2017. So once working agreement running. So they wanted to know what was some of the things she did. And she said she was working, doing agreements, running errands. If he was to go, if he needed her to book a hotel or or friends or females or male friends, how would you know how to book? She said R. Kelly will call her and tell her someone was coming in. And so then they said, well, who was paying for this? Who paid for the travels? Who paid for if they stayed in other cities? And she said Mr. Kelly would pay. So did you meet these workers and other friends of the employer of your employer? She said yes. And so exhibit 2. And then they said mark for, and then wanted to know who. And then she said Bruce, and said Bruce who? Said Bruce Kelly was one of Kel's. And they said, what did he do for R. Kelly? Bruce Kelly actually was R. Kelly's assistant at one upon a time. And then she said assistant for Kel's. And then they said that she talked about June Brown. And then they gave another exhibit 4, and then said who is this? They showed these pictures of these people. So as I'm reading these to you guys, these are the people who the government has and they pretty much is working in this case against R. Kelly. Okay, so exhibit 4, who is this? This is George Kelly. And then she wanted to know who George Kelly was, and said AKA he's Junebug. And did he work for Mr. Kelly? Yes, he worked as an assistant. And then they put another exhibit in there, exhibit 5. Now I wasn't sure if his name was Van or Ban, so I wrote both, okay, because it said it so fast, so you got to listen fast in order to catch all of this. So then it was like Van or Ban. And then she said, well, what did he do? He was a driver. And then he played basketball, and he would play ball with R. Kelly. And so then exhibit 8, which is Blackie, and they wanted to know, did she know his real name? But she said that was his nickname. And then what did he do? And she said he was a tour manager at the Point. And then all of them worked for the defendant, is what they said. And they said, you also testify, did you see them in the did you see them in the capacity all except for Blackie? And she said all except for Blackie, because she seen them all except for Blackie. It said early 2015. She said she don't recall. Do you remember exhibit Bubba? And then she said yes, and then she gave his real name, which was Jermaine Maxey. And then they went to say, well, Bubba never worked for Kells. He never ever worked for R. Kelly. Then there was somebody by the name of Top Gun, Foster. I believe, I don't know. I wrote Lake, not sure why, but something around about Lake, or it could have been something else. But I was just trying to, hear what I heard. And so then it said he was a tour bus driver. Okay, that's his last name. It was something Foster. His nickname was Top Gun, but I guess his name was Foster Lake. That's what it was. Okay, so then the tour, and then they wanted to know, what did he do? He was a tour bus driver while they wanted to know while she worked with R. Kelly, he was the tour bus driver. She said yes. And prior to her coming in working for R. Kelly, yes. And then they went to another exhibit, and then this exhibit was Diane Copeland. And then they wanted to know, what did she do? She was an assistant of R. Kelly, and they said prior to 2015, she said yes. Did she work after October 2015? And then she said after 2015 she worked, then after part of 2016. And then they went to exhibit 38, Cheryl Mack, assistant. And then what did she do? She was an assistant. She was booking some kind of management from 2014, 2015. She said she recalls, but not after 2015. Then they talked about Lily. They brought Lily up. They said Lily, and then she said, do you recall who Lily was? And then she said she was told that Lily was the god sister. Okay. And it said what time frame, and then she said the middle of 2016 is when she came in. Then they went to exhibit 44, and they talked about Linda Minch, or Merch, however you say her name, and she was R. Kelly's attorney. Okay, she was around from 2015 to 2017 and was acting attorney. She was also working before Dr. McGrath as well. And then she said, well, he was and they wanted to know, what did Dr. McGrath do? And she said he was R. Kelly's physician. And then she said, well, when Rob went to the hospital, she met him at a show and a concert. And then they presented another exhibit and said, who is this person? This person is Ian, and showed his photo and said, what do he do? He's Rob's engineer. And said they worked at the same time and before. And then went to another 50 and said, who is this person? This person is Abel. Abel is what? Abel is an engineer, was working same time prior to working arrangements and after. Okay. At the concert, did you ever see them distributing his number? And then she said, whose number? It said Robert's number, R. Kelly's number. And it said, well, she said, who? Yeah. And then she basically said, yeah. It said, well, who? People who worked for Robert Kelly. Yes. In what form would they distribute? And then she said, on paper. And then they brought in exhibit 75, which is Jane Doe number 5, and said, I'm showing you a witness, Jane Doe number 5. This is the same person? She said, yes. So Jane Doe number 5, ever met in person? Did you ever meet her in person? She said, yes. Where? In New York City. When? Where? And then she said the Barclays Center. And then she said, do you recall the date? And then she said, no. And she said, during your travel, did you have social media? She said, yes. And then they said there was some exhibits, 3,500 SMLL. And it says, they wanted to refresh in her memory. So does this refresh in your memory? September 23rd, 2015. How did you meet Jane? They call it Jane Doe number 5, Jane. So how did you meet Jane? Said, my sister and I arranged her and wait. Arrange and don't answer the calls. Okay, so I guess she was trying to reach out to Rob and he didn't answer her calls, but then he called her back, and he called her back on FaceTime. He was like, he said, I put the phone on Jane Doe and said, say hi to your auntie. And then it said, did anyone know her name? And she said no. It said, do you have any recollection to the defendant or Jane? I mean, a relationship. I'm sorry. Do you have any relationship to the defendant and Jane Doe, number 5? And she said no. And then said, but he's like my brother. She talks about R. Kelly is like her brother. And then she says, uh, he's like my brother. And then she talked about California, uh, literally himself like my. She said literally he's like my brother, and then or like a cousin. And he said so she said hi auntie. I said hi niece. What else happened on the FaceTime call? And then she said June Brown uh said to get us into the show. He called to say to get us into the show. So she continued to call her niece. Did you hold on, she said, did you see her wait, did you see her at the concert? She said yes. Talking about Jane Doe. Yes. She really wait. Oh, she said she saw her at the concert and the cigar bars and Barclay Center, and then also in Harlem, New York. And then she said herself, her sister, and Cash, Bubba, Band, Todd, and some other friends named Les, and was Jane on the Sprinter. Did you did you and Jane go where was Jane? And she said on the Sprinter. Who is Jane? Who Jane was? And then she said she was who was Jane was. She said she was an inspiring artist, and her parents wanted her uh, to go travel with us. Not sure if it was tour or spa dates. Did you attend next shows? Where? And she said yes. And she said, and they said where? And she said Washington D.C. And said, do you recall the venue where the next shows was was at? And then she didn't. And then she said, so then they said September 26, 2015. Was Jane there? And she said yes. September 22nd, 2015, they went to Baltimore. And she said R. Kelly had a show in Baltimore. Any concerts with Kels? She said come back to any other shows with Kels, come back to New York. And then she said on September 11th, no, September 28, 2015, there's something called the Jungle City Studios, okay? And then she said she does not recall where it's located, but it's in New York. And then Rob had a listening party, okay? And then she talked about Cash was a stylist for R. Kelly and was there. And she said September 29, 2015, wait, so September 29th, 2015, uh, then they presented an exhibit 3511, page 18. It said, left New York to go to the West Coast. They left New York to go to the West Coast. Everyone left. And then she said, yes. She said, Jane Doe still there? Yes. And then they said, so why the West Coast? R. Kelly had shows, and she said, "Where?" She said, "In Oakland." In the how did they get there? She said, "In the Sprinter." She said, "Well, how did they the other people like the producers and stuff and the crew?" She said they flew. And she said, well, who you recall Jane Doe, and where did you recall Jane was at? And she said in the Sprinter. And she said, how long did it take y'all to get from New York to Cali? She said about 24 hours. And then they said October the 1st, 2015. Do you recall looking? And then they wanted to give her recollection back. She said, so now on 214, they was on I-80 on the road, okay? And then she said, so October the 3rd, 2015, Oakland is it fair to say you arrived in Oakland? She said, yes, it took a few days to get there. Yes. Food breaks. Was Jane on the Sprinter from New York to Oakland, California? And then they presented a 3500 SMLL. And she said, any other performers outdoor? Does she remember like that he performed anywhere else? And she said, yeah, there was like an outdoor theater. And she said she couldn't recall the name. And so they wanted to refresh in her recollection on that. And they called it Thunder Valley. Then she went to October the 4th, 2015. After the performance, do you recall the next one? And then she said yes. Which where was it at? It was LA. And then she recalled. So October the 6th, 2015. Do you recognize those there pictures taken in the Sprinter? And then on October the I want to say the 10th, 2000. This is what it is. October the 10th, 2015. They got an exhibit 257A, 257B, 257C. 250 257A was twin, which is the Mayweather and her sister. And then they said they started with R. Kelly. And so then actually I numbered it. So was Jane was C, and then it was a picture with R. Kelly and Jane, and then there was a picture in 257B, which was Jane Doe number 5 and R. Kelly, and along with her sister, which was twin, okay, the Mayweather girl. Now, October the 10th, 2015, they had another concert in Inglewood, California. She said who was all there? She said herself, her sisters, Cash. She said she tagged Bubba, and his name is Jermaine. That's what they had to correct her to say that. So then said Jane was there, and she said yes. Was Jane there for those shows? And she said the stylist, and said Cash Howard was the stylist. Exhibit 256. Do you recognize this? A photograph of her and Kells at October the 1st, 2015. And then she went on to talk about Kells introduced her to Jane. Did he discuss how he first met Jane? And then she said yes. And then she went into the discussion, took place in Chicago. He met her at a concert in Florida before her parents. Jane called to meet him at his hotel. She came to meet him going on the road. She said she was 18 at the hotel. He was afraid. Eventually, she came back to Chicago with him. What did he say to you? He was very upset. He put her out of the Sprinter. Juice went to find her. She was in the park. What did he do after all of that? And she said she was 17. Her parents signed an agreement. Um who was responsible? And then at that would have concluded today's um testimony. And so they ended the day with just that, like that. They just kind of left me in limbo. I was really, really upset. I was very irritated. So you can kind of feel my temperament a little bit, because they just kind of left us in limbo, and just, they did a cliffhanger. I mean, can you be mad? Because I do the same thing, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, it's only right is right, and it is what it is. But they definitely left us a cliffhanger. But tomorrow they're gonna resume with the same witness, and then they're going to continue to question her and get more information from her. But I just wanted to give you guys what I got today. I will have more for you guys. As you guys know, this is my birthday week, and I decided to spend it right here in New York City, and bring this information to you guys. So I hope I was able to bring the information to you guys. I hope I was clear enough for you all, and I will be even more clearer come tomorrow. I want to get some rest, and so that I can get myself prepared for this next round, because it's getting heavy, and listening to all these names calling and name dropping and accusations, and this person was here, there, and everywhere. So I'm open-minded. I'm not trying to be biased. I know I'm pro R. Kelly. I know I'm for this man, but I have to be open-minded. And right now I'm waiting on Cannick to come and knock it out the box again, like he continues to do. So just continue to just pray for me, pray my strength, pray for Kels, and that tomorrow be a better day, But I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You're at the right place. That's going to bring it to you guys like no other. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you everything that's being said in the courtroom. I will give you guys 2 lives. I'm going to do the lunch live that I do with you guys to give y'all an update on what's going on in the first half, and then I'll bring you guys the second half once the day has ended. Okay. Again, like, share, subscribe. If you want to donate to the channel. $1 $Hollywood Next. You do not have to donate. It's not required. But if you have it in your heart and you want to help out while I'm here in New York, please do so at your discretion. And all is well ends well. Don't forget, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. I will see you guys on the next one. And let me get up out of here with some kales, like I do what I do when I do. Peace.
The sky's not supposed to touch the ground, and I swear it's not supposed to be round. The moon's not supposed to touch the sun, and a two is not supposed to be a one. And the heart's not supposed to weigh a ton, and forever's not supposed to be done. Winter's not supposed to come in June, and I am not supposed to have the blues. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, babe, except you and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be, ooh, baby, yeah, except you and me. Night's not supposed to be long, yeah. No one is supposed to be alone. Understanding is not supposed to be confused, and the wind is not supposed to lose. Like fire's not supposed to freeze, but like joy is not supposed to grieve. Like you are not supposed to leave what I said I'm not supposed to mean. He is not supposed to have your heart. Baby, we are not supposed to be apart. There are so many things that are not supposed to be said. You and me. There are so many things that are not supposed to be. Hey, baby. It seems just like no seasons changing. Oh, this earth with no creation. Oh, heart, no feelings. Or a sickness without a healing. Just like a frozen spring. Or a bird with no wings. Just like a song out of key. That's how my life would be. Like the night skies with no stars. A lonely road. No holding hand or walks in the park. That's how it would be if we were apart. There are so many things, yeah, except love. So many things that are not supposed to be. Like having nowhere to be. Like having no one to free. Like having no rain for the sea. There are so many things that's not supposed to be. Not supposed to be. Except you and me. Baby.
Pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
One piece at a time, y'all. Free R. Kelly.